Hi, I'm Dr. Len Saputo. You're listening to the Voice of Reason. Welcome to the show. We've got a really great show for you tonight. We're going to be looking at something a little bit different tonight. Normally we're talking about some aspect of COVID-19 and how it's not working right or what it is, what we are doing right and how you can manage it. And today we're going to look more at what's happening. We're a disorganized mess, basically. And on top of that, we've got this racial uprising, which is a horrible problem to have to deal with. It should have been done 100 years ago, 200 years ago to solve it. And in this whole thing, there's very little understanding of science behind what's going on, especially when it comes to COVID-19. We have a lot of interesting ideas about it, but we don't really understand a lot of the aspects of it that we need to know so we can know how to handle it. We don't have any treatment for it. In the mainstream, what we do is supportive care, and we use ventilators if we have to. And that's about as far as we've gotten. We're in a lockdown. The objective now is to wait for a vaccine, which is dicey because we've been working on a vaccine for about 18 years for SARS-1. And of course, this is SARS-CoV-2 that is the same family of coronaviruses. And we're not looking at the natural cures that we should be looking at to try and see if we can bring those forward into our treatment regimen. We have a whole problem because we're going broke. People are losing their jobs, their homes, their health insurance. And at this time, we'd be delighted if we could just have a cure for this and get us back on our feet and back to work. But the problem is that's not enough. There's a much more deeper reason that is involved with illness. It's not just being at the wrong place at the wrong time that we get sick. There are areas of spirituality that have a prominent role in what's happening in its cause and what it means and how we deal with it. When we look at some of the work that has been done by previous people, it's remarkable, particularly in the field of religion and spirituality. And we need to pay more attention to what it means so that we can find out what the purpose of getting sick is. There is always a reason why. I'm impressed after practicing medicine for 50 years at how intricately organized and perfect the universe is in almost every way. And that applies to the role of illness in our lives. It's not just that we're in the wrong place at the wrong time. I think there's always a meaning to it. And that's one of the things that I've learned that I have great respect for. And when I see patients in my office, I pay attention to that because I think that at the deepest root of all of this is a spiritual meaning for what's happening. And the problem is we're happy and content just to get back on our feet and back to work. In fact, that's why we go to the doctors. We expect that. But that isn't really getting to the root problem. And so what do we learn from the process of being sick? Basically, it doesn't amount to much. We don't learn anything from it most of the time. And it's not necessarily that we should be paying attention just to our spiritual lesson, particularly at the beginning, and particularly as a doctor, because when somebody comes to me and they've got a serious illness, like say cancer, or they've had a heart attack and they're in heart failure, spirituality is not the first thing that comes to mind. It's how do we provide comfort for people so that they can feel better about their illnesses and what they have. And that's the big thing, because that's what we learned in medical school. We were taught to relieve symptoms and make people feel more comfortable. But when it comes to the deeper role of illness, we don't do so well. And that started 400 years ago with a fellow named Descartes, when he brought science forward into the mainstream of how we think in our culture. And when that happened, they threw the role of spirit out because they didn't have metrics to measure spirituality. And so without metrics and trying to be scientists, what do you do with it is what they said. And so that's persisted for 400 years. And we're still in the realm of science wondering what spirituality is all about, but not really paying attention to what we could do as doctors and as scientists. Because when you think about it, science and spirituality always have to be congruent. They can't be different, because what is. You can't change that. And if you have two different ways of explaining it, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That gives you a more complete perspective of what's happening. But that's not, we shouldn't be separating those and thinking that one's right and the other's not. And what the scientists did was basically throw the role of spirit out. They gave it back to the church and said, you figure it out because we don't know what to do with it. Now, what kind of reasoning is that for a scientist? That's about the worst thing that you could do when it comes to trying to figure things out. Einstein in 1918 addressed this issue. He basically said the role of the physicist is to try and understand how the world works, how the universe operates. And he said, good luck with that, because what I have found, what he found, is that it's only through experience and our intuition that we will know about how the universe works, but we don't know why it works like it does. The fact is, we don't know what gravity is, or electricity is, or what light is, or sound is. We don't know what any of those things are. We don't understand what they are. We know about them because we experience them, but that's a whole different story. So it's interesting that we've come a long way the last 400 years and still haven't got to a place where we're looking at the bookends of how we see things through both domains, through a holistic approach that looks at both the role of science in understanding things as best we can, and the role of spirit using our intuition and imagination. Where do you think your ideas come from? I found that that's where I get my brainstorms, and it's not like they're mine. They come to me at the most strange times, when often I'm thinking about something almost in a trance-like state. And that's when I begin to understand or to know about a new concept that I haven't thought of before. And I keep coming back to the incredible organization and perfection of the universe. And that's how I think we should be trying to practice medicine. I think that even though that's very obviously important, it remains pretty much invisible to our doctors, because we're trained pretty much now to work for big corporations that tell us how to get people back on their feet and back to work. When we look at healing, we should be looking at the trinity of the patient, the doctor, and the role of spirit, and what I would call a love-filled partnership, where listening and caring puts us in touch with the person's own inner healer. It's really about soul healing, and there are a lot of people who talk about soul healing as an important part of what healing is about, but they aren't just the mainstream doctors. And again, it's going back to trying to bring science into the picture too much. When I think of somebody who's sick and the body is not doing well, I look at the body as a reflector of our spiritual journey and of the problems that we're having. So Louise Hay was right when she started making the connection between our symptoms and our emotions. But you could take it a step deeper and look at how this really relates to our soul, to that spark of spirituality that resides in the cosmos, but is also in us. And when we look at it that way, then we're looking at the headaches and back pain and digestive orders and heart attacks and strokes and all the things that go there as originating at the soul level, with the intention of giving us some kind of understanding about what's happened and how that relates to how we're living our lives. So our body becomes the reflector. It embodies these disabilities that are designed to help us to understand more about what's happening. Now, medicine is no longer controlled by experience and conscience like it used to be. It's now a business proposition. And our natural curiosity wants to understand things, but good luck, because we should go for trying to understand as much as we can, but we should realize that it's really only God that really understands the whole story and how it fits together. So my practice has changed a lot in the 50 years that I've been practicing. I started out thinking that I knew just about everything because I had just graduated medical school and I passed my boards. And I learned how to do the things that doctors do with the drugs and surgeries and technologies. And that's important to use. There is no doubt that you would never want to throw out the technical things that advances that we made in medicine. Never would you want to throw those out, because that clearly saves lives. But it doesn't look at the deeper meaning of what illness means in the context of our whole life story and how that fits into our community and on all of our family relations and how that fits into the whole universe, because it's all related. We're all one big universe. And if you think holistically like I do, you can think of yourself as one aspect of what's in the universe. If you think of it scientifically, you're like one grain of sand on the beaches of the cosmos, which is almost insignificant. But if you think of that holistically, then you will realize that it's really important that the universe act as a whole entity. And every grain of sand matters, because everything that you think and everything that you do affects every molecule in the universe, in my belief system. And that's a belief system that a lot of people have when you start talking about spirituality. So when we look at COVID-19, this is an opportunity for us to be able to learn more about ourselves and what we can learn from the illness itself. We can learn about how it's affected our culture, our families, and all of what's happening on the planet. It's a big way to look at things, and it's an integrative way to look at things. And you know, while most of our doctors don't practice spirituality, they're spiritual themselves. They go to church, many of them go to church on Sunday or whatever day they go, and then they go to work on Monday and they put a different hat on, and it's like the role of spirit just went out the window and we don't do it. So we've got to open our eyes more to what's more complete, what makes the most sense to us, what feels right, and go about it like Einstein said. You know, you're not going to understand how the cosmos works ever, because we don't have the ability to do that. That's what he's saying. But through our intuition and our experience, we can learn a lot from the gifts that are given to us in our sleep or in our meditative states. Where do you think all the big ideas that you have come from? So I'm motivated myself to practice the best medicine I know how as a doctor of internal medicine, but not to get carried away with it, and to look at a more integrative approach that I can use when I'm treating my patients. And that takes time, and it takes listening, and it takes caring. And when I find myself in that space and my patients are in that space, the time just flies. And it's not like you can really solve much of a problem in 15 minutes. It takes at least a half an hour to begin to approach the topic, and then maybe an hour or two after that. And the problem is it's not financially a good way to make a living, but it's the best way I know of trying to help people and to help myself as I begin to have the experiences that my patients have, and do it in a way that I have spiritual growth from that as well. So this holistic, integrative, person-centered, preventive model of health medicine that I've worked on for the last about 30 years is finally coming to a place where I can practice that way. And I know that a lot of doctors are longing to have that same practice themselves. And I think that's starting to happen. And as we go through the things that we're going through with COVID-19 and all the things related to it, and through the racial disparities that we see, maybe what we'll find is we can come together. And when things get bad enough and there's enough of a disaster going on, we're more inclined to practice that way, because it brings us together. Whenever there's a Holocaust of any kind, we have an innate nature of pulling together to support one another, to build community, to share and give and love, and sacrifice ourselves for the benefits of others. And if we do more of that, we're going to have a way to deal with our own lives so that they're more fulfilling, because what we want is to share and give and love. And when we learn how to do that better, it's going to be a much better world that we live in. So you're listening to The Voice of Reason. I'm Dr. Len Saputo. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back tomorrow with another show.